Hello, everybody. Happy Easter.
Happy.
Welcome to the a presentation by the Aquarian Series here at the San Diego United Lodge of Theosophists. And the topic for today, appropriately for Easter, is the topic of the symbolism of the cross. And Monica Page has stepped up and has volunteered to give us a presentation. Very much looking forward to that.
Hi, everybody. Wonderful on this Easter Eve to be with you. This presentation is primarily from the article written by Helen Valborg, great theosophist, of course, titled the same, The Cross. All right, so what I would like to do is start with a reading, which is from the article, The Words of Madame Blavatsky, from her book, Isis Unveiled. She says, the philosophical cross, the two lines running in opposite directions, the horizontal and the perpendicular, the height and breadth, which the geometrizing deity divides at the intersection point and which forms the magical as well as the scientific quaternary, when it is inscribed within the perfect square, is the basis of the occultist. Within its mystical precinct lies the master key, which opens the door of every science, physical as well as spiritual. It symbolizes our human existence, for the circle of life circumscribes the 4 points of the cross, which represent in succession birth, life, death, and immortality. When the Europeans first embarked on their journey to conquer the New World, the Americas, North, South, Central, and surrounding islands, they found in the culture among the native people images of the cross in abundance on clothing, tools, artifacts, items for religious rituals, even on decorated faces. She tells us that the early, I just want to check if this is, okay, here it is. She tells us that the early Christians had perhaps too quickly made the assessment that this must have been due to the natives having had contact with the Christians before their arrival, and that the symbol of the cross meant to the natives what it also meant to them. The Europeans were puzzled, she says, that the symbol of the cross so blanketed over the day-to-day reality of the people would carry such meaning for a tribal, unsophisticated people. And coming to this new world, the Christians learned about primarily two things in the various myths in the culture of those people regarding floods and the coming of a great spiritual teacher. They were puzzled that the symbol of the cross was blanketed over their day-to-day experience. But it seems also that they'd made the assessment too readily that it was because they'd had contact with the Christians who'd come before them, even the actual apostles themselves. And Miss Valborg says that there's no decided proof of this, that there are places where the disciple St. Thomas is said to have performed miracles and taught the people of Yucatan, Peru, Mexico. Further, she says the idea that the cross had both philosophical and cosmological meaning for these people because of their own spiritual and cultural experience occurred to few of these Christians, and even among those there were fewer who had perceived the universal nature of the symbol of the cross. Centuries would come and go, she says, before the world would realize and respect that the cross had been venerated for countless millennia before Christianity. Okay, how do I move to the next? It's not giving it to me, Jonathan.
Test this.
I just did nothing.
Should work now.
Okay, I see. Okay. The myth says that, oh my goodness, I've lost something. No, those are not I don't think. I'm sorry, everybody. The myth of the Spider Woman focused on the Eastern and the Western point. Spider Woman who brought forth Utset and Nautset, mothers of the Indian people and of other races. The story says that Utset would eventually lead the people through what is called in this tradition a sipapu, a word used also by the Hopi Indians, which means a place of emergence, a hole or an entryway that leads into the physical realm, which marked the emergence of chaos into order as it does. The story goes that a mortal woman taken as a wife by a solar being in the celestial world, and having given birth to a child who is both of heaven and of earth, the devoted mother taught the child the laws of the heavens. Yet she could not subdue her own curiosity and uprooted a plant that was specifically forbidden. Of course, beneath the root of that plant was a gaping hole that was a point of no return. So she had lost the ability to return to that solace that she'd been a part of, and she had no choice but to descend to the earth. And so these tribes envisioned in stars in the shape of equilateral stars and crosses, which looked over the fallen mother, reminding her of the realm that she fell from. I need it, it just won't do it for me.
Click
Yeah.
into it.
I did. It's not doing it. Okay. From here, the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma tells the myth of how the son of this lonely mother, called Little Star, descended to the earth and took on form, human form, that he killed a great serpent that then lodged in his head. If the serpent can symbolize for us wisdom and knowledge, the question may come up, could this idea reflect perhaps the beginning of Manas? You know what? I think I need to see all the slides on this left side.
Just touch escape.
Okay. That's, forgive me. Okay. All right. It goes on to say that as his body then disintegrated, he lived on in the shape of a cross. Here we are in this center here, looking at that cross. Until after fervent prayers, the serpent came out through his mouth. Now, could this be the activation somehow of the beginning of sound, speech, thought power? He then became Venus, the morning star. All of this, to in whatever flowery tone, speaks to theosophical ideas of the gradations of spirit into matter, of the pristine connecting power of Fohat and its gradations into the various planes, becoming the various Shaktis descending downward as the link between spirit and matter. The power of myth and storytelling is that they can contain great spiritual eternal truths that survive the cycles and the ages, stories that contain potent imagery that allow these truths to anchor within the collective heart and mind as a seed awaiting maturity and readiness for more explicit and direct inquiry, as we have, an understanding of that which is abstract. In Valborg's article, she speaks about this, saying that as she addresses the myths of these great peoples, we can hardly avoid being reminded of Plato and his teachings about archetypes, telling us that the physical world is only a copy of, a reflection of the forms that exist in a higher world. Archetypes that embody, in whatever more subtle and higher realm, great metaphysical ideas. But what seems most important, it seems that according to Ms. Valborg, she emphasizes that the various myths are part of an abundant collective storehouse of a refined ideation, she says, that has existed ever since man first became endowed with mind. And I'm thinking here of the Akashic records. I don't know if I'm correct about that or not. And from this sort of borrowing that goes on, from the collective ideas that exist on the higher planes, the cross, she says, has emerged with such frequency, such repetition, that it clearly suggests that which is both essential and also universal at the level of cosmic prototypes, but also buried within us, within the individual and the collective mind. This is perhaps why society comes back again and again to the remarkable works of the Bard, our beloved William Shakespeare, whose plays are so filled with soul-recognizing archetypes, and also part of the work of the psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung, whose focus was also on the collective, on archetypes, and individuation. Plato, Helen Valborg says, pointed to the cosmological when he described the creator as, quote, splitting the whole world along its entire length, the perpendicular into two parts, and then again joining them with the horizontal, just as with our beloved Spider Woman of Sia, the Pueblo tribe. The perpendicular and the horizontal express height and breadth. The geometrizing deity, Valborg says, divides above and below, right, left, before and after, all the dualities. She says, in a manifesting world, duality clearly seems, we know, we're taught, the fundamental characteristic of manifestation. And spirit into matter seems to indicate the idea that sacrifice is built in. Duality manifesting into spirit, matter, spirit raising up matter. Ms. Valborg says the cross is the epitome of paradox in that it is the symbol of both the unifying and the opposing forces. They make up the nature within us, the microcosm as well as the macrocosm. She says that from one point of view, the Garden of Eden is the symbol of crucified man, but she also says that the premonition is put forth of law, justice, evolution, And it also represents order regarding the balance of the higher and the lower forces that we must come to marshal and find ourselves in control of. This, of course, speaking to the idea of manas, the thinking principle being a dual in a body, the higher and lower, treading the path of light and wisdom that we must be vigilant about. She speaks further on about the civilization of the Sumerians, who heralded the cross as the emblem of their god Shamash, the god of sun, justice, and divine law, who gave to the great king Hammurabi his laws with which to rule. Further in the article, she says, she speaks of the cross and the identification with the idea of order, which is echoed, she says, in the Buddhist wheel of the good law, identifying, of course, the four basic spokes of the wheel with the cross, the added four, making a total of 8, telling us that the phrase, the turning of the wheel of law, refers to the act of the teaching by Lord Gautama Buddha, the 8 spokes of the wheel representing the eightfold path given us: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right conversation. Concentration. Yeah, that too, conversation too. But the point is that these beings come to us with a specific that gives us the opportunity to give form to a life that does not surrender to chaos. Now, the Sia people, some places it's spelled S-I-A, some Zia, and I've seen T-Z. So the Zia sun symbol and the number 4 is particularly important with this group of people. They hold the number 4 as sacred, as we probably all do, whether consciously or consciously. It says the Zia sun symbol originated with the Native Americans of Zia, Pueblo, Indian village, in ancient times. The symbol has a sacred meaning to the Zia. 4 is a sacred number that symbolizes the circle of life. 4 winds, 4 seasons, 4 directions, and 4 sacred obligations. The circle binds the 4 elements of 4 together. Okay, so it's not. Here we go. All right, the very formation of the core of the cross, which in the most abstract, as drawn by Plato or contained within a circle, which might indicate a specific cycle, whether through one's religion or a spiritual path, the cross speaks to us of the divisions of time. Helen Balboa goes on to say that for many a people, divine law exerts itself through the laws, through the lords, or the genii of the 4 corners of the universe, which puts one in mind of the manifested universe spoken of in Christianity, the archangels who rule the 4 directions, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and also in the religion of Islam, known as Jibrail, Mikael, Israeli, and Azrael, angel of death. So each of the 4 representing the 4 cycles of life can pretty much be found in the major religions. She goes on to tell us that the idea of the circling around the 4 points of manifested life, whatever the people, whether American Indian or Tibetan, all convey the same idea, the circling motion of evolution. While the center of the cross, like the Sia Pueblo Indian, is that place, it says, of the rosy flame of transcendence, indicating the sacred blend of the lower with the higher, giving way to higher love and devotion and union with the higher self, as also well reflected in the Rosicrucian symbol of the cross. She goes on to speak about the Inipilaj of the Dakota Indians, saying that the sacrificial fire of burning where wood pieces cross one another also symbolized the bringing together of the opposite forces of life. And even in our daily life, we're met with opposing forces. We know this. We may come to a pivotal crossroads that require us to make a definitive choice, many times without all the information we may think that we need, trusting our intuition, responding to life as best we know, which may put us on the path of light and wisdom, or on the path of darkness, or some karmic mix that may not at first tell all, but we have the opportunity. In cultures all over the world, people have come, she says, to their crossroads on some seeking the help of forces of some magical effort, which may be full of great possibilities for good, or unfortunately, unbeknownst to the practitioner, perhaps the opposite. But we know, we are taught, man is responsible for his own rise and his own fall. A few words from the poet David McCord. But man must light for man the fires no other can, and find in his own eye where the strange crossroads lie. So our own perception and the choices we make through that perception in any given cycle can lead us further up the ladder or propel us downward. And even then, we may not know that it's a matter of being called on to engage in a compassion that we have yet to grow within ourselves. In all the cross symbols of the world, what we can readily perceive, whether horizontals, perpendiculars, are added to a wheel, or a gentle flower in the center, signifying the meeting of heart and mind, or the fire in the center, signifying divine aspiration, the will to good, the noble idea of sacrifice, the descent of spirit into matter, the divine intention to raise up all to the higher frequency of the one life. And how is this accomplished? In the world this student has inhabited, the age-old question was always jokingly, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, jokingly asked, but the answer taken seriously. And in this application, even more so, because where opposing forces are looking for the slightest inroad into our consciousness. Here, Raghavan Iyer, in his remarkable book, Jewel in the Lotus, a compilation of the words of great and exalted beings, speaks of how they come to man for the sake of man in certain cycles to help the ailing, suffering, too materialistic man on the wheel of rebirth, having forgotten his true condition and reminding him he's being tested. This is from Trials. He says, true devotion comes to birth through the firm recognition of the unity of all life and the universality of the highest ideals conceived, transcending the human capacity to formulate and transmit them. When devotion continues undiminished through the trials that it necessarily brings, just as light increases the shadow, it renews itself. It must be put to the test, and it surely will be. The moment one approaches the presence of a spiritual teacher and professes one devotion, the jealous Lama yin of endless space rush to taint and rupture the current of total commitment. He says that is always the way, illustrated in the fairy stories and myths of all peoples. He says one has to encounter the abyss. One has to be tried and tempted. Jesus Christ, the Savior, had three great temptations, of which a beautifully perceptive account is given by Dostoevsky in the story of the Grand Inquisitor. All initiates, he says, go through trials, and they do this deliberately. Because although those who are perfected before birth really need no tests, they compassionately reenact the archetypal story for the sake of the human race. That which is good, that which is bad, every combination of the two, here for the sake of the perfection of our discernment. And Helen Valborg, in her article, speaks of this truth of duality. She points out, and it's certainly found in our common language, how many of the old films where we've heard the gangster speak of being double-crossed, how many times in the world of the legal profession have we found it necessary for someone to be cross-examined in order to get to the truth of a matter? How many times do we find ourselves at cross purposes with ourselves? And how many times have we looked back in time on some particular episode and found we learned hard lessons and benefited mightily from the opposition and duality? The significance of the symbol of the cross shows up in many ways. And as we travel this path of wisdom over and over, lifetime after lifetime, we're charged with the Dharma of working it out and extracting and offering, engaging in harmony where there is no harmony. Valborg goes on to say that the X signifies the cross, yet the meeting of both the upper and the lower world, the plus sign, symbolizing both the centrifugal force moving outward from center and the centripetal force moving toward center. Considering the cross as a bridge or ladder to God, as in Jacob's ladder, we would seem to indicate the ever-continuing process of evolution and all of nature gradually becoming more and more conscious as the power of mind develops in us, again, raising up matter. Reflecting on the idea that there was a tree laid down that was part of the entrance leading to Solomon's temple, symbolic of the rite of passage to an even greater wisdom within the temple. Valborg says that here, the idea of Solomon's temple is at last a decided shift away from the handling of the conjoining forces, and now more of the idea of reestablishing, strengthening that link connecting heaven and earth. She goes on to speak about the Siberian Vogels. I looked it up. Vogels, they were singers, but referred to as birds. A nomadic people of Russia named Mansi engaged in ritual where they made tall pillars from firewood, adding cross pieces to the pillars with articles representing sacrifices. And she also speaks of the sun dance of the Plains Indians, who would attach themselves to tall pillars with rawhide lines, dancing around it while gazing at the sun, offering the sacrifice of their stamina to their deity. So beautiful. The wood of the tree chosen was considered very important, like that of the Maya Indians of Yucatan with the Tau cross, which was mistaken by the Spaniards as proof of an early Christian influence. So let's see here. The caduceus right here, the symbol many of us know to be connected with the medical industry, became established in America in the late 19th and 20th century. The two serpents winding around a winged staff, forming a cross, defined by many as a symbol of the accomplishment of the balance of opposing forces within a human being in order to bring about and maintain a state of health. The Egyptian Ankh here of Egypt that represents life and immortality and the breath of life, the circle at the top, indicating perhaps the endless cycles of activity and rest in universes, and the breath of life that flows through it from the absolute. The Ankh was associated with both the goddess Isis and the sun god Ra, used as a talisman, amulet, symbol of eternal life. There are many people today, and I see it fairly often, who wear the Ankh and cherish this symbol of Egypt, identified with agriculture, fertility, resurrection. It was given to the pharaohs to ensure their afterlife. Okay, so here is in Mexico, the cross was the emblem of the Quetzalcoatl. I hope I'm saying this somewhere nearly right. The god who gave the people their laws and their arts, and in celebrations often identified with or accompanied with a plumed serpent, as this little lady is engaged in. An idea that would seem to indicate a great reverence and joy regarding the various Shaktis that would manifest in the lives of these people. The myth of Quetzal, before I go on with Quetzalcoatl, I wanted to say that here in San Diego, I'm definitely impacted by a major and strong community of people from Ethiopia, and this here is their cross, and I think that this is something of a shaman who may lead a service or something like that, but a very strong community of these wonderful people who are from Ethiopia, and having looked up to try and find something about them, this is Christian for them, but their history is polytheistic. So they lived in a world where they were free to worship in whatever way. It wasn't only Christian. So that was kind of nice to understand. But getting back to Quetzalcoatl, in all of these tales, the common factor was the form of a cross with a divine messenger, like here. Whether the caduceus of Hermes, the Tau and cross of Quetzalcoatl, or the unsated cross of the Ankh, associated with Osiris or Jesus Christ crucified, it is an emblem and geometrical configuration of life and sacrifice connected with a spiritually enlightened being. These two always together, it seems. The writing goes on to say that man is the inheritor of these great archetypal sacrifices, and if imbibed with the desire to embrace this spirit of sacrifice, man, as the figure of humanness, the potential bridge between heaven and earth, in this way, can take on a broader association with the spirit of sacrifice in time, including all humanity, not just one central being. It doesn't mean that we lose the respect for the one being, but having the consciousness that the totality of us has this inside, it seems, is what's being said. In other words, with the understanding of the overarching Dharma that sacrifice is, we may, as well we should, be reminded of these great beings who've demonstrated this in cycles time and again, but also come to understand this in terms of the action of the whole humanity, not just one central being as the savior. We know of the small demonstrations of sacrifice in daily life, Someone goes without, so another may have. Someone helps another in some fashion, so that the one who is helped may in turn be able to help someone else. Helen Valborg in the article speaks of how George Bernard Shaw asserted that in Europe, instruments of the torture of Jesus Christ were made into symbols of faith. She says that although he may have been oversimplifying this idea or this insight, it did provoke questions about the morbid tendencies that grew out of this focus. The self-pity, the supplication before what he says, what she says were harrowing statues of Christ depicting him bleeding in agony on the cross. She says there is little doubt that this dismal identification to the cross would give way, and to sacrifice would give way to irrational expressions of bigotry, violence toward those of other faiths. In the early Christian tradition, this state of consciousness, not only the person we know as Jesus of Nazareth, stood also for Christos, the Greek term which translates to one who is anointed. Christ associated with the cross, the spirit of order emerging out of chaos was known as the anointed one. Over time, the gradual emergence of the meaning of the cross became increasingly dead letter, relating only to the material and the physical rather than the glorious universal idea, a more abstract idea. And from there grew an increasing confusion, it says, where the idea symbolizing Christos, the force and the rod, linking heaven and earth, became related only to a person and a particular event. There have been all sorts of stories generated after the crucifixion of Jesus. One that after his death, the rood or the cross was then divided into fours and sent to the four quarters of the earth. Another that the Persian king Khosrau stole the cross and brought it back to Jerusalem, where its presence filled the air with a sweet aroma. And Valborg states clearly, however artfully these stories may have been woven, she says it still perpetuates the focus on this terrible agony. I'd like to read this quote to you from her article, and she says that I think is important. If one reads the Gospels with a deeper intuitive awareness of the cosmological and universally human symbolism involved in the crucifixion, one will readily see that Christ is not depicted as a martyr. Instead, one will see that the cross plays a fundamental role in what is a divine transaction, transcending time and space and individual suffering. Powerful statement. She goes on to say that if the heart of the cross, the central still point, is continually held foremost in our minds, in our consciousness, the degradations of the symbol would cease to occur. The tree of life that the cross represents, that even our human form represents, grows out of no thing, the absolute. That it extends endlessly into the manifested, giving way to that cross, that those whose hearts and mind are filled with the compassion for mankind will willingly suffer. Just as with the tree of paradise in the garden, there's no intrinsic good or evil, she says, with the cross. With the exaggeration, only the exaggeration and focus in the mind of man on concretization, fixed on the morbid focus of only the physical, incapable of perceiving and being anchored in his true identity as spirit. This from Raghavan Iyer. Any person can, from small beginnings, tap the immense potential power and a vow to give birth to lasting devotion. This cannot be done even with an authentic start and a self sustaining rhythm, unless it is fortified by the fearlessness and the courage that are rooted in the invulnerable truth of one's devotion. Quite a statement. And that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Monica, so very much.
Welcome, sir.
You have, why don't you stay up here?
Okay.
You have taken us on a journey through myth and symbol, through anthropology, through psychology, through everything, through archetype, through abstract symbol, and above all, universality. Because you have shown that the cross is not of one particular sect or group, and no one owns that. And it may have been temporarily appropriated, but part of the theosophical movement is to return due credit where it is due, which is really it's part of the inheritance of humanity. And so, with that, would you be willing to take some questions?
Sure.
Okay, I'll just sit down, and if I see some hands, then
Okay.
we'll do it like that.
It's Gyro. Hi, Gyro.
You want to unshare?
Oh, okay. Stop share. Hi, Gyro. Hi there.
Hey.
Oh, there. Now I hear you. Good.
What about the number 4?
Okay.
What do people in China think of it? Because it sounds like death. Maybe a little change in the position of the vocal, the mouth and things, changes it to sound like the word death. So perhaps they're kind of shying. They shied away from it as if the number 4 is bad luck, sort of like our number 13. So then, how did it affect their culture? Perhaps that's why they have 5 elements, or maybe 6, or whatever. And then another something to think about is there's a lot of cross, like double cross and cross this and that. And what about the crossroads? Thank you.
Well, thank you for both of these questions. I cannot answer directly to you about the number 4 regarding the Chinese people, but it could be that somewhere in their ancient times, in their establishment of their own idea of the structure of the universe, they chose to not use the number 4. We know in what I was speaking about earlier of birth, death, and Plato had this too. Birth, life. Oh my God, this cannot be happening. Anyway, it ends in death. The point I'm trying to make is it speaks of 4 cycles that, in a way, that death, saying that death is inevitable. And it could be that very idea is why they shy away from the number 4. But I don't know that much about that culture, but I am understanding, I think correctly, that we have this number 4 and embrace death because of the doctrine of reincarnation, for one thing, and the traveling on any path to the realization that there really is no death. And so who's transcending what? It could be their way of perception that is built into their culture somehow. But we know that life continues from one placement to another. So, and the other thing you asked me about, I think if you could say it again because it's just kind of tipped away out of my
Uh,
mind.
the
What?
crossroads.
Oh yeah, the crossroads. Yes, what I got from Helen Valborg's article, and from teachers and students on the path, is that there's always at certain times in our lives a testing that uh, it forces us to make a choice. And we may not always be able to perceive what's down the road, but the choice has to do with the power of good and its opposite. And so, if I understand correctly, these enlightened beings have done this over and over and over again. And in our reality, we get to have the ability to decide, to make choices, and to experience the outcome of those choices. And so, being that the masters are beyond desire, their choice has, oh, oh, there they are. That they are beyond desire. Their choices have nothing to do with that. It has to do with entering into a sacred agreement to care about man. And we're still, we'll get there, but that we're in process and making choices, hopefully, for that are higher and higher. I hope that answers somewhat. Hi, David.
Hey there, Monica. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I'm not sure if you mentioned it in the talk, but one of the really powerful and ancient symbols of the cross, unfortunately, was totally poisoned by the Nazis, in the 20th century, but the swastika.
Yes.
And I know because it was, prominent in Buddhism, that in China, actually, I think I've read that the swastika, that cross is a symbol of good luck. It has been. So
So,
it's interesting. The cross, it was all over the world. That swastika showed up in different cultures and stuff.
well, if I understand this correctly, the swastika, the original meaning of the symbol is somehow somewhat related to the four corners of the universe that Christianity puts, Archangel Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael.
Mhm.
And so it is this flow of power throughout the universe that is originally referred to. Of course, it has, and India is another country that still honors the original meaning of the swastika. And I've met Indian women who won't take their purse out, in the city, so to speak, because it has the symbol on it, and they know what it has come to mean to the masses. So, who knows? Maybe we can get it back. Maybe a golden age means we can get the true meaning anchored in our consciousness, the way this horrible meaning is anchored in the consciousness of the masses at this time. But we did talk to it, and it did speak, I think, a little briefly about it, but it's greater and greater cycles, whether it's the seasons of time. But we're completely aligned with these four things, these four moments in the smallest and the greatest way. So I love Helen Valborg and her honest attempt to pull us out of these dreadful and wrong meanings. So thanks for bringing that up. It's important. Jonathan?
Yeah, is that okay? I can't see the thing, but is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Or there's other hands up right now.
Nobody else's hand up, but something says that there's a virus detected.
Oh, okay, that's probably what the problem is. Yeah, who knows? Let me get rid of this thing here.
Okay.
Oh, Monica,
Yes.
I was going to say also, just since no one's speaking up at the moment, I think it's in ISIS Unveiled, HPB makes the reference to the swastika as Thor's hammer, which
Oh,
is
that's right.
interesting
Yes.
in the myth of Thor and what he represents. Yeah.
I've heard the phrase and seen it, but I don't remember what Thor's hammer means. Does it mean the manifestation of a certain place in time for a certain consciousness? I'm not sure.
Right. Not me either. So.
Okay. Jonathan?
In one of the Dalai Lama's books, he talks about how there is the idea of the bodhisattva ideal in Christianity in reference to actually Jesus dying on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that it's actually very moving for him. Even though we say there's a lot of blood and gore and so forth, for him, the idea of giving yourself to humanity in relation to their suffering. And it's very moving for him. It's really, to him, it's the embodiment of the bodhisattva ideal. And I was wondering if you could speak to, I guess, the idea of sacrifice and the cross.
Well, okay. Yes, His Holiness speaking about the Bodhisattva ideal. I think, first of all, whether it be Christianity or any other path, I think that a lot of us, due to mass consciousness, may easily forget that if we seek to strengthen a character within us, or make a commitment or vow to any form of good, that it connects us to a higher force that is the origin of what we're trying to accomplish. Like if it's patience, whatever we feel we may need to make stronger within ourselves for the purpose of helping others. The Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist, and the Lord Gautama Buddha, that path, they make it clear that that's what you're doing. You know, Christianity, organized religion, for the most part, just says go be a good girl. And so I don't know if that's always a good thing or always a bad thing. I don't know if I can land anywhere, but it would be great if we had more awareness and knowledge of what we're engaging in and how much more we could accomplish. Maybe it would be in a form of encouragement for people, rather than, just let the Lord handle it. I don't know if that gives us great strength all the time, but having a great being to have in mind, I'm not going to discard that for sure. Any other questions? Jonathan, look at this. I'm not. Oh, Anne. Okay. Yes, Anne. Can you? There you
yes,
are.
there I am. Okay. If you ask someone to draw a cross freehand, they will almost always draw it in the same proportions, with the upper section smaller and the cross, the horizontal part. It will almost always be in proportion. That seems to be very deeply embedded in the human mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who was it? Plato that said God geometrizes. So the earliest beginnings of manifested life is symbolized in the cross. And that happens in a geometric way. And I think that we have that, I think, as I said somewhere earlier, stored in our subconscious or unconscious mind. So to allow ourselves to become too materialistic is to lose that connection that is at once love and detachment. It's an impersonal configuration. So we need it. We need it to understand ourselves, and we need it to be better able to help others, I think. But anyway, you roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Do you think that could have anything to do with the shape of the egg?
The shape of the egg,
The
yes.
You know,
Oh,
kind of the elongated, but like an oval instead of a circle.
an oval. Yeah, that must.
The way the cross is long, the way she was describing it. I don't know.
Well, it's once again, it is one of those mathematical creations that has nothing to do with our, preference of how something should be or look or not be, but that I think it was HPB that talked about the egg and that it symbols, a life, not only a cycle, but a life within that outward shell, and that it's so much more sacred than we realize. So that's a world, a potential world inside of an egg. Any more questions?
I just want to, this is Des. Hi there, Monica.
Yes.
What a
Hi
gift.
there.
What a gift, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we're on the number 4.
Yeah, okay.
And she talks about the 3 and the 4 in reference to the Tao and the Cruz Ansata and this unfolding of the cube, where you have 3 on the horizontal and then this 4 in the vertical to equal 7. And I think she says in the poem, she talks about the cross in the circle, but she also talks about when that line goes outside of the circle, then consciousness becomes, goes outside of its pantheistic beingness. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, because when we're talking about birthing out of an egg, in a sense.
This is definitely mother talk, isn't it?
Exactly.
So it's once the circle, does that in any way once the circle is no more and the cross is there, does that mean on some level that consciousness is ready to take on, to be responsible at some point or to some degree? I'm not sure, but it
I'm not
seems
sure
that
either.
with each phase of development where something is released, that's a lone cross by itself would say that there's something. Maybe the Sia people, the Sia Pueblo people, have something right here in their myth, in the way they talk about the boy who is both mortal and of the earth, is it lived as a cross in the heavens. What does that mean? That he's not ready to be on the earth? Does that mean that the way they tell the myth is that he and then it was the other thing where sound and speech, and I'm glad you're the person because you know about this. I talked to you about this before. Sound speech is the beginning, and they're saying that it came out of his mouth once he came to, but the serpent was sitting in his brain. So now, aren't serpents a Shakti, a form of a force or a Shakti or representative of wisdom in some sort of way. So
Well, it
that
sounds like a continuing story, and we've heard this story before. in a different context.
exactly. But he could not come down to earth, and so he just hung out in these spaces in the form of a cross. I mean, that says quite a bit.
A lot to contemplate, but yeah, the numbers, the geometrics, all of it is, it speaks to you in sound, because all of this is in sound.
Yeah,
All of it is in sound.
amazing.
Yeah, and it's amazing just how ubiquitous, how universal the cross is in societies and civilizations, oceans apart, and
Yes,
sometimes thousands of years apart. So
exactly.
just it must be something that is already written in us.
Yes, well, that's what Val Bork says. She says that it is a part of our individual collective psyche, and these different stories that come out through the myths are part of what is already our connection to life, having given form of some sort. And so this collective um, ideation, she calls it, gives every group the opportunity to, one, be inspired by something higher than the earth plane and its, goings on, but also that the unconscious or conscious awareness that this is something that is inside all of us. So I don't know, not very easy.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Beautiful presentation.
Well, thank you. Let me look in the chat. Taro, the crossroads as a metaphor resonates universally. It represents the choices and challenges we all face in life. Johnson's use of this imagery taps into both personal and cultural narratives, making the song deeply evocative and timeless. Thank you so much. Maluka says number 4 is the number of stability. Thank you, Maluka. Number 4 is the number of the earth and mankind. Number 4, she says, is the number of the square. Thank you. Ken, beautiful presentation on the time antedating Christianity. Thank you for this. Thank you, Ken. You're absolutely right, Jairo says. The number 4 is considered unlucky. Oh, yeah, we did discuss that. Okay, superstition. Miluka, 4 plus 4 equals 8. HPB says that 8 is the number of the earth and death. Family world tragedy happened with a combination of the 8. I never heard that before. Shoba. Wait a second. Hi, Shoba. Why am I not seeing everybody, Jonathan? I would like to see everybody. Hi,
I
there
think
she.
Maluka had her hand up first.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll let Maluka speak.
Okay. Miluka?
Hi, lovely. Very interesting. I can see that you put a lot of work into this, and your presentations are usually so beautiful.
Thank you, my sister. Learning.
Nice. I just want to mention that according to the Secret Doctrine and HPB, that she said that at the beginning, we didn't have the language, so we have to use symbols. And the idea of having symbols is because it's universal and because it will be preserved, and it was also a code. It was a code from the beginning, so that symbols, you cannot alter symbols unless you become an axis and change the rotation of the cross that is opposite of inverted instead of the way they're supposed to be. That's what the Nazis did. But other than that, usually it's difficult to change the symbol. So there are tribes, as I know, from the native, from the African, and almost everywhere in the world, that actually have the stories like the Hopi Indians. And
Yes.
apparently in these mesas, what they call at top of very, very, very high sacred mountains, they have those tablets with all these symbols. So that was the first language, was symbolic in the cave and so on, but it was for that purpose. And that's why HPV insists so much in symbology and numerology, because that is a code. And that's something that you keep coming back in different body, but you always find your way home through those code and symbols. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yes, I tend to agree with you, Maluka, and I think that it is at least in part because the symbol, I think somehow inside leads us beyond not just everyday reality, but beyond thought, beyond the chattering of the mind, of the lower mind. Mm-hmm. And so to focus and meditate, which is what Valborg also seems to be suggesting, is we're to keep our focus on the symbol of this higher ideal, then so much will be made clear to us. But we'll get there, right? Anybody else? Oh, Shobha.
Yeah, I just was this thinking. I was looking at the ISIS for the whole thing about Thor's hammer that David talked about. And it's interesting. She talks that Thor's hammer symbolizes electricity, that the power of electricity, because she's talking about that there. And I was just thinking, Desiree was talking about sound. And then you talked about the ankh. It has an egg-shaped thing. Yes. We already talked about the egg. Vibratory sound, motion, electricity.
Yes.
Everything is there in this symbol. It's just a brilliant symbol. And thank you so much for a beautiful presentation, Monica.
Oh, well, thank you. It is, we are very fortunate to be on this path and have better understanding. I am so grateful for that. And the unselfishness of these beings that willingly come back over and over again, just to radiate to us something higher, that we don't get lost. I'm just so grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
I have a question.
Okay. Jonathan has a question.
There's as a mystic, Thomas à Kempis talks about in one of the readings in the Jewel and the Lotus that he makes the observation that we all like the idea of the kingdom of heaven, and we like to hear about that. But who of us really are willing to sacrifice? And then he says, we like to hear about Jesus as fasting and so forth, but who of us is willing to share in the fasting? Okay,
absolutely.
On the heavy lifting side of it.
Yes.
And then he says, we are very much moved by the story of the cross and Jesus' sacrifice, but and him bearing the cross. Okay,
willingly.
But who of us is willing to bear the cross and to do that?
Yes.
But I was thinking, well, maybe you could talk about the symbolism of bearing the cross if you thought about it.
Well, I don't think that there's anybody that doesn't sacrifice in some manner. The key question would be, are we doing it willingly? And in what attitude are we engaging in this so-called sacrifice? And so there are plenty of people who are sacrificing. They don't know that they're sacrificing. They don't know that that's what they're engaged in. And further, they don't know what the potency is of doing this further down the road without the slightest bit of anything but willingness for the sake of others. That's a whole other place. And so these beings that come back and back and back, they're not coming back to shake off, some desire, or I think I'll do this, or I think I'll do that. Then I will be helpful. That's not it at all. So the guardian wall is a potent reminder of no matter how well you think you are doing, or how selfless you may, your idea about it, there's a leap that is made that is above and beyond what we even know from. And so I think about, again, cycles where I've heard in classes where there will be a time, a golden age again, where these great beings can walk among us and not have the slightest fear that something awful will happen to them, because our consciousness it will have changed so dramatically. So all the sacrificing that we think that we're doing, and we are, I mean, at some level, there's a whole other place that gives us, I think the serviceman, the military man, listen, everything is dual, but there is a military person, male or female, who totally is immersed in the idea of sacrifice. And so there are all kinds of ways to practice, as I was saying earlier, the habit of doing this, the habit of saying, I want to see that this is better, this person is better, this group is better. Somehow it gets stored up and we come back with a greater mobility in that mode. But they never leave us, the guardian wall. Even in this, I don't know how immersed we are, how much more we have to do with this particular cycle, but we know they are there. But we have to reach out too. We have to do the studies, we have to do the work. So anyway, I'm going on, but
Oh, that's beautiful. If there aren't any more hands up, that would be an extremely high note to end the meeting on.
okay.
And then next week is invulnerability, I believe. So
Invulnerability.
make
Okay.
sure.
Thanks again, Monica. It was beautiful.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience and your kindness. Never to be forgotten.
Thank you so much, and happy Easter again to everybody.
Yes.
Happy Easter. Namaste.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Thanks, Monica. Happy Easter.
Be well and safe, everybody.
Thank you.